that's working, yeah. Good afternoon and welcome to today's meeting of the Audit and Risk Management Committee. Welcome also to those watching the meeting on YouTube. During the live broadcast, members and officers are asked to please ensure their mobile phones are placed in silent mode. Only audio from the microphones will be captured on live stream. Therefore, please ensure they switch their... Oh, I've lost my place. Please ensure mobile phones are placed in silent mode. Only audio from the microphones will be captured on live stream. Therefore, please ensure they are switched on when speaking and off when you have finished speaking. Minutes will be produced in the usual way and a recording of the meeting will be available to view on YouTube until such time as the minutes are produced. I will begin with agenda item 1 and call upon member services to report any apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies received today from Councillors Gavin Booth, Councillor Miss Kim French and Councillor Christie. Substituting today we have Councillor John Clark substituting for Councillor Gavin Booth and Councillor Nawaz substituting for Councillor Christie. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 2. Agenda item 2 is to confirm and sign the minutes of the previous meeting of the 24th of November 2025 as being a correct record. Do I have a proposer to approve the minutes? Yeah. Councillor French, you can propose then. And since nobody else was here, I'll do the seconding on that one. Thank you. Does any member have any comments to make on the minutes, please? Looks like there are none. Councillor French.
Thanks, Councillor Benny. We did look at the independent person. I don't know whether it's coming further on in the agenda, but in the minutes we did actually look to see whether, because we have discussed this several times, are we going to have an independent person on the committee? I don't know if you can answer that now, or will that come down later on the agenda?
Peter, can you answer that one, please?
I can. We did produce an independent member report. I think the action has been completed, but it hasn't found its way to this agenda.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm just thinking of local government reorganisation, which is supposed to take part in 2028. I'm just wondering whether it is worth actually having an independent person, but maybe that will come to the next meeting.
Did you want to make any comments on it now, Councillor French?
No.
Thank you very much. Right. Agenda item 4 is to receive, agenda item 3 is to report additional items for consideration which the Chairman deems urgent and by virtue of special circumstances now to be specified. There are none. Agenda item 4 is to receive any declarations of interest under the local code of conduct in respect of any items to be discussed at this meeting. If you have anything to declare, please can you raise your hand? There are no hands raised. Thank you all very much. Item 5 is the draft auditor's annual report for 2024-25. I now call upon Debbie Hanson from Ernst & Young, external auditors, who is joining the meeting virtually to introduce the report. Can I have a proposer for the report? Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Debbie, I now hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. So as noted, this is our draft audit results report, and this is a report that we're required to present to you, which sets out the key findings from our audit of the financial statements. and we're required to present this to you so that you can understand the context of the audit and what our findings are before the committee actually approves the financial statements, which is the next step of the process. Just by way of context, we will be issuing again a disclaimed audit opinion, as we did do in 22-23 and 23-24, and that's because of the fact that because of those disclaimer years, we have not been able to gain full assurance over sufficient balances in the accounts yet. Although, as you will see from the report, we have started to rebuild that assurance, and I think Appendix B of the report summarises where we've moved from having no assurance last year to either full or partial this year. So we are making progress in the correct direction. But I'll take you through a little bit more detail of that in a moment. We've set out within the report what our materiality is that we're working to, so that the overall materiality is just under 1.3 million. We then set what we call a performance materiality, which is the level at which we perform our audit procedures. And we've set that at 75% of our overall materiality, which comes out at just under 1 million. We have considered to revisit that throughout the audit because of the fact that we did have 2 years where we have undertaken no audit procedures. But because of the relatively low level of errors back in 21-22, when was the last time we did an audit, and actually the relatively low level of errors we found this year, we are satisfied that it remains appropriate to leave that performance materiality level at 75%. So that's the overall context of the audit. What I'll take you through now is some of the key messages in the executive summary. So if I can take members first of all to basically the status of the audit, which is on page 6 if you're using our hard copy page numbers, page 8 if you're on an electronic pack. You will say that the status of the audit is that we've now completed all of our substantive work. We have noted a few areas there, and I'll just take you through those. So we still need to receive a final amended statement of accounts, which has the audit adjustments that we've identified corrected for. And I think it's probably worth looping back at the end of my session just to sort of discuss the process for the final approval of the accounts. And obviously we need to receive those and check those. We then also receive a signed management representation letter at the date we issue our opinion and undertake our subsequent events review up to that date as well. The next item we noted was the agreement of the revaluation surplus, where we had an item of around about 1.5 million that we couldn't track through. Management have not been able to come back to date with a response on that, and therefore we've agreed that we will leave that. The reason it doesn't have an impact is that the opinion is disclaimed anyway. That mainly impacts on the reserves balance, where we have no assurance because of those disclaimed years, and also the CIS, where we don't have full assurance. So the overall impact on the opinion is not significant, and therefore, in light of the backstop date of next Friday, we've agreed with management that no further work will be undertaken on that balance. In terms of our REFCUS testing, which is linked to our fraud risk, we have concluded our testing in that area. I've concluded my review of that. We have got one unadjusted difference that we have noted in this report, but that's not material and so does not impact on our opinion on the financial statements. If I can then take you to pages 7 and 9, where we've identified the key risks that we noted in our audit plan and the status of the work that we've completed on those. You'll see in relation to most of the areas we've completed that work. The only exceptions I wanted to draw your attention to was really IFRS 16, which was the new accounting standard that was implemented for this year, where we weren't able to complete our audit work in that area. And there's a typo I've just noted in this when I was reading the report earlier, because the council had not undertaken a complete analysis of the leases required to capitalise, and therefore we couldn't complete our work in that area. We have noted that we found a couple of audit differences in relation to PPE valuations, so valuation of land and buildings, and also the pension liability. The PPE difference arose because there was an incorrect floor area used in the calculation of the valuation for a leisure centre. We've discussed that with management and looked at the other valuations and are satisfied that that's an isolated error and is not material. And the pension liability valuation difference was due to a difference between the financial statements and the data in the report from the actuary. I understand both of those differences have been corrected, but obviously until we get the final set of accounts, we can't confirm that. On the next page, we just make a couple of control observations. So in our work on related parties, we noted that the evidence that we were provided with didn't include declarations of interest for all the officers that we wanted to all the members that we wanted to test, apologies, and we've therefore made some recommendations related to that. And also PPE depreciation. We noted individual asset lives are not held on the council's fixed asset register and are calculated separately.
Sorry to interrupt. I've just had a comment from a member that you're speaking rather quickly, and we're
Apologies.
struggling to get the content of what you say. We know you're talking, and thank you very much. But would you mind just slowing it down a little bit so we can take in what you're telling us, please?
That's absolutely no problem.
Thank you very much.
I will go back a little bit then just to help clarify on any of the key points. So if I take you back maybe to the risk areas, would that be satisfactory if I restarted at that point?
That will be fine, thank you.
Okay. So as I've said, on page 7 using the hard copy, numbering 9 using electronic, we identify the areas of focus or risks that we identified as part of our audit planning process. We've noted there all of those risks individually and then the status of our work. On most of those, we've completed all of our work with no significant issues identified. The only areas I wanted to draw to your attention was basically the second item, where we have the risk of fraud in revenue and expenditure recognition. And that's through 2 different options, where you could either incorrectly capitalise expenditure that should be revenue and therefore charge the CIS. And the second area of risk is that you could incorrectly classify expenditure as revenue expenditure funded from capital under statute. And both of those options or issues basically allow the council to use capital resources to finance revenue inappropriately. In terms of the first element of that risk, we test the additions to property, plant and equipment, and we've completed that work and did not identify any issues or misstatements. In relation to the second element, which was REFCUS, I have now completed that my review of that area, and we've just noted one uncorrected difference of 0.45 million. That was in relation to one of the items we sampled where the council was unable to provide evidence to support it, and therefore we classified that as an error. It is not material and therefore does not impact on our audit opinion. In relation to the next risk, which is valuation of land and buildings and investment properties, we just identified one error in relation to the valuation of one of the council's leisure centres, where a floor area had been incorrectly calculated, resulting in a misstatement of 0.42 million. That has now been corrected by management, and we are satisfied that that's an isolated error based on the other testing that we've undertaken of other assets held by the council. The next risk was pension liability valuation. We completed our work in that area and identified one misstatement of 0.1 million. That was because of a difference between the figures in the actual report and the figures in the financial statements. It has been corrected by management. The next risk we had was implementation of the new leases accounting standard, which has been quite a challenging area for all local authorities. We were not able to complete our work in that area because a thorough analysis of all the council's leases that required capitalisation of this new standard had not been undertaken by the council. And that was where I noted apologies. There is a typo on our report where the not is missing from that sentence. The final risk we noted was a specific risk to 24-25, which was the change in the payroll system. And we finished our work in that area and didn't identify any misstatements. If I take you to the next page, we've just noted some control observations that arose from our work. The first of those was in relation to our work on related parties, where part of our checks include checking back to declarations of interest provided by members, and we were not able to obtain evidence that all those declarations had been completed and therefore had to undertake alternative procedures, and we've therefore made some control recommendations in related to those processes. We also noted that PPE depreciation is not calculated on the individual asset base using the individual asset lives on the council's fixed asset register and is instead done on a separate Excel spreadsheet. That made the audit testing difficult in that area, and therefore we've made a recommendation in relation to that. If I can then take you on to the next page, which is the financial statement reporting assessment. So this is where we've assessed the effectiveness of the council's arrangements for the production and the audit of the financial statements. We also included this in our auditor's annual report, which we brought to the November meeting of this committee. Therefore, I wasn't going to dwell on that in great detail. What I would note is that we've noted a number of areas where improvement is required, as you will see from the colour coding. but we have given the context on the final page there, which is page 13 if you're using electronic, 11 on ours, where we have noted that this was the first substantive audit we've done since 21-22. There have been some changes in the finance team, with the previous chief accountant who had a key role in the accounts leaving during the year. And therefore it was always, I think, going to be a challenging year in terms of the gap since you'd had an audit and those changes in the team. However, I think we worked constructively together, and as you'll see as I take you through some of the appendix of the report, we've started to rebuild the assurance. So although we have identified areas for improvement, I think we're working collaboratively together to further improve those for next year. The next section of the report just gives more detail on the individual areas of focus, but I've given you the key messages from those already and therefore wasn't going to take you through those. Section 3 of the report then just sets out at quite a high level our value for money work, which was reported in greater detail in the auditor's annual report back in November. We noted there that we had identified a risk of weakness in relation to the arrangements to support the financial statements in light of the delays in the previous years in terms of production of the accounts. We concluded that that was not an actual significant weakness in 24-25, but we did give that very careful consideration in light of the areas for improvement that we've noted in the previous slide. And we'll continue to keep that under review. So we expect to still have that as a risk of weakness for next year, because we are still hoping to see further improvements in the arrangements to support the audit of the financial statements. The next section of the report that takes you through the audit differences, but I've already referred those to you, and the control differences and deficiencies. So if we'd just like you to take you through a couple of the appendices. So Appendix A, which is on page 38 using electronic numbering, 36 using ours. This sets out the expected time frame to possible unqualified opinions in 26-27, set out in the LARIG guidance issued by the NAO. We've included at the bottom of that in the yellow box where the status of Fenland Council is compared to those, and we've noted that you are actually behind that expected time frame, and that's because of the fact that we actually had a disclaimed opinion in 23-24 as well, and were not able to undertake any procedures in that year and have not been able to complete all of our planned procedures this year. So you are slightly behind the time frame of where you potentially could be in line with the LARIG. Appendix B is then the summary of assurances that we're including in our reports for the first time, which basically shows you what level of assurance we have on some of the key balances. And I think that shows, definitely positive movement from last year where we couldn't do an audit and therefore have no assurance across any areas. You can now obviously see that we have assurances in full assurance, which is a substantial green in a number of areas. We have partial in relation to property, plant and equipment, and that's due to some quite specific issues. So the council does do a full revaluation of all of its property, plant and equipment each year. And so that means that we have assurance over the valuations at the end of 24-25. However, because of the disclaimed years, the council also has some property, plant and equipment that's held at historic cost, and therefore we don't have assurance over those balances within the financial statements. And that's probably the main area of the gap, although we do also have a small gap in relation to transfer of assets under construction in 24-25, where we're unable to complete that procedure because we couldn't get sufficient evidence to do our testing. Just to draw out a couple of others where we didn't get assurance, so short-term debtors and short-term creditors, that was issues in terms of being unable to get transaction level listings to enable us to undertake our testing on those balances. So that's something we'll need to work with the finance team on for next year so we can start to rebuild that area. The local government pension scheme we have partial on, and that's again due to a very specific issue. We were not able to get assurance over the membership data provided as part of the triennial valuation in 2022 because of a change in the pension fund auditor and the fact that we didn't do an audit for that year. However, there will be a triennial valuation next year, and so therefore that gap in assurance will get naturally filled next year. I've already referred to the leases point where we couldn't get assurance. The CIS, again, we had some areas of the CIS where we couldn't fully test the transactions, but other areas that we could. So again, that's moved to a partial. Reserves, it's impossible to get assurance until we can have a rebuild strategy, because reserves flow from all the transactions in the disclaimed years of 22, 23 and 23, 24. So that's a position at all local authorities where there's a disclaimed year. And then the cash flow statement, we were not able to complete our procedures because we didn't get appropriate working papers on a suitably timely basis. That was probably all I wanted to draw to your attention. I'm sure members may have some questions on the report or comments, and we're very happy to take those. And then, as I said, I think it will be helpful to loop back round to the cover paper in terms of the process to move from here to final approval of the accounts and issue of our audit reports.
Thank you very much, Debbie, for your presentation of the report. I now open the item for discussion. Please raise your hand if you have any comments or questions, please. Councillor French.
Thank you. I was going to ask why these audits haven't been done, but it has been explained due to whether it's staff shortage or I was concerned it was more a lack of resources, but you know, I can accept that. One of the things that I am concerned about is the property and the equipment. Due to the fact we are looking at local government reorganisation, I think this is essential that this is done, brought up to date as soon as possible, because I believe that obviously our financial officers will have serious concerns if we don't know what we actually own. And I was going to ask again about the outstanding debt, but I will do that through ARP, which I have a meeting in a few weeks' time.
Thank you.
If I can just make a comment on the sort of the PPE points, I don't think we haven't identified any issues in terms of concerns about the completeness or accuracy of the council's records around its fixed assets in relation to those that are valued on an annual basis. The council does hold some categories of assets at historic cost, which is in line with the SITFA code. And the only reason we haven't got assurance over those is because we haven't tested additions and disposals of those assets in the 2 years where disclaimed opinions were issued. And the assets under construction is quite a specific point. So in general, we didn't identify any issues with either the valuation, the existence, or the rights and obligations and ownership of those assets. So we haven't reported any significant issues in relation to that point, just to clarify.
Thank you very much. Councillor Clark.
I'm only a substitute on this committee, so I'm not fully aware of all the bits and pieces, but there seem to be several areas of concern in your report. And I just wondered, as a benchmark with you dealing with other authorities, you know, where would we be on a scale of good, intermediate, needs improvement to give me a reassurance of where we are and where you see us going as an authority?
So I think the main areas of concern we've highlighted are probably in the table I referred to about our assessment of the procedures to support the audit. And I think we've noted there that capacity is probably the key issue. So, you know, if you look at that colour coding of the bit in the executive summary, which starts on page 11, as I said, if you're using electronic, there's a lot of red and a lot of amber in there. And clearly where you want to be moving to is for the whole of that table to be green. So if you ask me my comparators, I have some councils where that's all green. I have some where there's a few ambers, etc. So I think that there are issues to be addressed, and I think it's always difficult with relatively small councils because the finance team have lots of other priorities such as budget setting. Local government reorganisation was mentioned earlier. That's obviously something that's going to increase the workload of the council significantly. And so I think many small councils in particular do need to look very carefully at the capacity of the finance team and the support they get from other areas of the council, because the finance team pulls together the accounts, but they need information from many other areas of the council and many other departments to do that. So I think it is very important that you look at that and make sure that you're satisfied that your finance team has the support that they need and sufficient resources to prepare the accounts and do all of the other things that they need to do, which will include local government reorganisation. So as I say, we've been working really hard with the finance team. I think we've been very constructive relationship, but there certainly have been challenges in terms of the capacity and the volume of information that we need to complete an audit, and therefore how long that actually takes to pull that information together.
Councillor Clark.
If I could ask our 151 officer, what are we doing to address the concerns of our auditors so as we're in a better position in 12 months' time?
Peter. Your finger's not very good today, Councillor.
Thank you. I think, you know, I hear we've had one or two conversations with the auditors. I don't think it's completely on the council. I think it's all about how we work together. I think ever since lockdown, auditors not being on site, I think there's lots of different ways where we could improve going forward. I'm actually pretty pleased with where we are. Particularly with the build back and the fact that we haven't had full audits for a while, and also the fact that Mark Saunders retired, and you know he was here for 40 years, and we're looking at doing things in a very, very different way now, where we're spreading it out amongst the team. I actually think a lot of the points are to do with external providers in terms of valuations and pension information, which isn't really down to us. I think some of the things where we didn't publish draft accounts on time was a deliberate decision from me to take the pressure, because we knew we weren't having audits historically because of these issues. I think we're in a pretty good position, so I'm not overly worried by this at all. I think we can get better. I think 24-25 has been much better. I think, you know, the lack of audit resource as well as internal resources to hit deadlines is an issue, but I don't think it is going forward. I think we failed to publish the draft accounts on time. When we did publish them on time for 24-25, there were some errors in there, as I would expect. I don't think we're looking at more resource in the team. I think we're spreading the workload out amongst more people. I think Sian has done a great job in that respect as well. So I think it's a story now where we've got disclaimed opinions. I'm not unduly worried, Ian. I think not Ian, Chair, and Councillor Clark. I think we're getting to a point now where 25-26 will give us more and more assurance about things, and there's nothing that I'm particularly losing sleep about.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor Hack.
Thank you very much. It's pleasing to hear what Peter just said. I mean, I had a couple of hours to try to read through this report. It proved harder than I had anticipated. A lot of technicalities. I mean, my basic question is the areas that are marked as ineffective or that require improvement. Are these carried forward to the following year? Or, I mean, is there any consequence to the council of these areas? Or do you just say, well, okay, sort it out, we'll come back and revisit it next year? And secondly, one term that particularly niggled me was materiality. I think it's materiality. What does that mean?
So in relation to your first point about the assessment of the arrangements to support the production and the audit of the financial statements, that's a single year assessment. So we assess each year in isolation, so those don't carry forward. The reason we're providing that is to both provide officers with our assessments of kind of where areas need to be improved, but also to provide you as those charged with governance with further information about our clarity of that assessment. And that's something new that we've introduced for this year. We haven't previously reported that in the same way. So it does, I think, provide a more granular assessment of the areas where improvements are needed. But I think that context that I gave before about this is the first time we've done an audit for 3 years. There has been changes, as Peter referred to, in terms of the loss of the chief accountant partway through the year, who'd been in the organisation for a long time. So we always knew that this year was going to be a difficult year, and we would expect to see a number of those areas moving to being more effective next year. If I can then move on to your question about materiality. So no audit of any financial statements, be it corporate or public sector, can ever provide 100% assurance on the material accuracy of the figures in those statements. So what all auditors do is calculate what we call a materiality level. So we are providing assurance to you that the accounts are materially accurate, or that's what we would do in a normal opinion, and that materiality gives you an indication of the quantum of kind of those errors. So that's basically what materiality is. We're not giving 100% assurance on the accuracy of every figures. We're saying that they are accurate to that materiality balance, and that's what we audit to.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Peter, would you like to come back?
Sorry, I am confident in our numbers and everything. What I wanted to say is actually we do take the external audit report and look at those areas where they are marked ineffective, and we will use them to beef up the areas going forward. So I don't ignore them. We work with Sian. We're already working on an action plan for 25-26, and obviously where the auditors, it's the same with internal audit, where they point out that improvements can be made, we'll be focusing on those.
Yes, thank you. I think the clarification was needed. Thank you for that.
Any other questions, Councillor Cloud?
You say you're not increasing your team's capacity, but has your team got the capacity to deal with the extra workload that they're going to be asked to do to come up to speed?
When I say not increasing capacity, I mean in terms of bodies on seats. What we are doing is we're actually developing people. We've got more accountants in than we've ever had before who are working towards qualifications. So what we're doing now is spreading the workload amongst a greater number of accountants, which didn't happen before. So we are increasing the capacity, although not in terms of headcount.
Can I just ask a question, Peter? Didn't write this down, so I can't remember which page it is. It says in there that we resourced, but we are 0.4 of a person down at the moment, or we are looking to fill that. Am I correct in that from memory?
I think that's internal audit, Ian.
Oh, right.
That will come up in the next. Yeah.
Any other questions from anybody? Right. I've got a few points I'd like to make from the chair. Whatever this is a big job. Internal audit, accountancy, all of this is a big job. And Ernst & Young have always do the external audits. And some of the problems here we've got is we haven't had the accounts signed off. I see from the accounts we've now got 22, 23 signed off by Ernst & Young. We've still got 23 and 24 outstanding. That's what it said in the report. Is that correct?
No, 23, 24 is signed off.
It's, yeah, 23, 24 signed off, yeah. So we called it. I've always been concerned, I mean, going back several years, Ernst & Young had resourcing issues of their own, and we couldn't publish stuff on time because those report the external audits weren't being done. And that's part of the problem. When you haven't got your closing balance from 1 year, it affects the opening balance of the following year, which I think has been highlighted in this external report. The council itself, we've lost Mark Saunders, who was here for 40 years. We've got new internal auditors, we've got new staff, and any fresh pair of eyes looks at things in a different way. And when you get a fresh pair of eyes, you get different ideas, you pick things up that you feel need looking at from a different way from your predecessor. And I think that has played a part in it. I think not having the final figures from that have been signed off is one part of it. Having new people come in, fresh broom sweeps clean, and there are changes that will certainly be brought into this. I feel that looking at the report, it has room for improvement, but then most reports have room for improvement in them. I think the council is doing a good job, and it's working towards improving the auditing standards, which we've been told it will be. So I think there's been a bumpy road for various reasons. We've had COVID, we've had working from home, with all of these things. I know they're excuses, and I don't particularly hold with all of them, but they are also reasons. They're not excuses, they are also reasons within this. The staff changes, Ernst & Young being under-resourced themselves to sign the accounts off as they should be, but that seems to be coming back. I think we're in a position where if we get the team right now, this can be coming right, so we get more green on there. Keep you happy, Councillor Clark. So personally, I feel that there are a few things in here that I've made a list of things I wanted to raise. Some of those have been covered anyway, and some of them I think really should be dealt with in a probably an informal setting with the auditing team. So I'm personally quite happy with this, and I think there's reasons for this, not excuses. I think moving forward, we've got a good team working for us that will take this forward. The audit work does need to be done, and it is a massive job, but there is nothing here that glares out to me that the council is in a bad position from this report.
Chair, if I could just pick up on the point of, obviously I haven't been doing the council's audit for a number of years. I wasn't involved in 21-22. I do know that the 21-22 audit was not signed off until February 24. What I don't have the detail of, I could go back and check, is the reasons for that delay. I recognise that would have had an impact on the council in terms of closing down subsequently or preparing subsequent years' accounts. But I'm not sure that it's right to say that was because of EY resourcing shortages. I can go back and find out what the reasons for delay were on 21-22, if that would be helpful, because I wasn't involved in that year, but I'm not sure it was completely due to EY resourcing issues. So I just wanted to note that for the records, as obviously this is a minuted and recorded meeting.
Thank you very much. Peter, do you have any final comments on this before we? Right, any questions from the floor, from the committee? No? Right, as there are no further speakers, therefore the recommendation is for the Audit and Risk Management Committee to note the contents of the report and that delegation be given to the Chairman of Audit and Risk Committee and the Corporate Director and Chief Financial Officer to agree any further amendments to the statement of accounts which may arise prior to the final sign-off of external auditors. Any comments, Peter?
I think Debbie did raise at the beginning that we need to just propose and agree a timetable for getting the final accounts signed off. So I'd like to propose that the final accounts are circulated to this committee once they're finalised, and therefore, and then once that's done, we could have approval by email and then delegate to myself and the chair to sign them off. And I think, Debbie, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that's fine, Peter, if that happens. Obviously, from our perspective, this committee is those charged with governance, and one of the key roles of this committee is to approve the financial statements. So normally what I would expect at this meeting when we take the audit results report is that the accounts are also at that same meeting, so that the members of the committee have got a chance to ask any questions about the accounts and ensure that you're comfortable to actually approve them, because ultimately that you are the committee that's approving the accounts. So I think it is important that we get that confirmation that as a committee you have seen the accounts, you're comfortable to approve them, and then to delegate the signing to the chair. So that's, from our perspective, I think that really is important in terms of the council's governance arrangements and compliance with accounts and audit regulations.
Thank you. Councillor French, you had your hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It does say somewhere in the report that the accounts will be ready by the 28th of February to be signed off. Is that correct?
It should be by the 27th is the statutory backstop date, because that's next Friday. So that is the date. We're working hopefully sooner than that is the intention, because if everybody looks to sign on the 27th, it's going to be a very, very busy day.
Thank you very much. Any members want to comment at all? No. Right, please can you then raise your hand if you disagree with the recommendation with the amendments brought in by Peter, please, if there's anybody disagrees with that. There are no raised hands, therefore the content of this report is approved. Thank you very much, Debbie.
Thank you. If it's okay, Chair, we'll leave the meeting now.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you very much for attending, Debbie.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye. Right. Item agenda 6 is the internal audit plan for 25-26 progress report. I now call upon Deborah Moss, Head of Internal Audit, to present the report. Deborah.
Thank you, Chair. So this is your normal routine progress report that I give to you each quarter. For those of you who are substitutes, I will just sort of quickly run through what I put in there. So I'm duty bound by the audit standards to report to committee on various points, which are the audits that have been completed and their actions since the last report, progress against the plan, resourcing of our teams, so that you can query that, and any agreed actions and the completion or implementation of those actions and any outstanding. So this progress report just gives you the actions that have been, the progress that has been taken since the November 25 meeting when you last met. We've completed 3 audits of streetlights, cybersecurity and commercial waste. Each of those has been given a reasonable assurance opinion, and the details of those, the findings and the actions, are in the report in a little bit more detail if you've read it. We have completed 2 further audits, but we haven't finalised the reports on those yet, so they'll come to the next meeting, and that's FACT, Community Transport, and also the enforcement audit, which is council tax and business rates. The next part of it is I've given a table just to give you an overview really of where we are with the plan. So the plan is agreed annually, and this gives you an overview really of where we are with each of those, so you can see at a glance which ones have been completed and what the opinion was for each of those. Leading on to resourcing, you mentioned already that we have 0.4 FTE still outstanding. Peter and I have spoken quite recently even about that. We don't know quite what we're going to use that 0.4 for. I think there's a feeling that we won't be able to recruit a part-time person to 0.4, but we are minded that we haven't done any IT audits, so possibly the budget from this year and next year, I'm minded to perhaps push those together and see if we can contract out some IT audit to complete the plan off really. You'll be pleased about that, won't you, Stephen? So we'll try and do that. If not, what we can do is use a previous contractor to complete some further audits for us, just to bolster up the amount that we've got coming through. Because at the moment, one of our auditors that started with us last year has actually, she's off at the moment for personal reasons. So that will, for the next few weeks, that probably will reduce the amount that we can complete, unfortunately. So Appendix A takes you through those 3 audits that we have completed and details the agreed actions in there. And then Appendix B is the list of overdue actions that are high risk. So it's slightly different to the report that we normally give you, but I've detailed there we've got 64 open agreed actions, and 43 of those are overdue and 6 of those are high risk or red actions. That does include, the 43 overdue does include quite a few that are very, very near completion, and 10 that are for performance management that are completed but perhaps not across the whole of the authority yet. So that's still being monitored by internal audit. It also includes some that are deferred due to LGR and have been given new target dates by the services to fit with their work pattern. So they're open, but they're still included in there. And that really concludes the progress report. If you have any questions.
Thank you. Right, can I have a proposer for the report, please? Councillor Hack, and the seconder, Councillor French. I now open the item for discussion. Please raise your hand if you have any comment or questions, please. Councillor French.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, looking at what you're doing now, Anglo Revenue Partnership Enforcement, I would be pleased if you could let me have some findings on that, as I am involved with ERP. I'm also concerned about the amount of complaints I'm getting about ERP with regard to lack of communications, complaints going in and complaints not being addressed, unless I have actually intervened, which I really don't think that's acceptable. If there are complaints going in, you know, they should be addressed by a certain time. Business rates, well, you know, that's We just don't know what's going to happen with that in the future. But I am concerned about the amount of debt we have. So if we can have an up-to-date performance on how much we're actually owed and why are they not chasing it. Thank you.
Would you like to come back?
Yeah, I can just say, so the enforcement audit has been, the testing for that has been completed, so I can give you a provisional that was substantial assurance on that, everything's working fine. Obviously, it doesn't go down to the detail of looking at complaints or the debt, it is just purely enforcement, and that the process itself is working properly and the controls in place. So, but I can certainly speak to the ARP partners and ask.
Councillor French?
Yeah, if I may come back with regard to ARP again, as you're well aware, we have a horrendous amount of fraud. And I do know that ARP are working exceptionally hard to actually, I don't know how many cases are going through court, but certainly they are finding, and I'm talking about millions, right across all the partnerships. So, you know, I have to give them praise there. They're working exceptionally hard.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd second that as well. I speak to the fraud quite often, and they provide us with regular details of what they've done, because we publish the statistics annually as well. So, yeah, they're doing a very good job.
But Peter?
Just, I know the word fraud is quite scary, but just to put that into context, that's mostly about the single person's discount is where a lot of the fraud is taking place. So people not declaring that they've got other people residing with them. So although it is fraud, it isn't like a big, a big multi-million pound thing. But we do have the Cambridgeshire Fraud Hub, as you know, and you were involved, Councillor French, in setting that up, which does an absolute sterling job on that type of fraud particularly, and that's where we get most reward, is on the single person discount.
Councillor French?
Yeah, if I may come back, I would also like to say thank you to County Council, because without their substantial contribution, we wouldn't be able to pick up these frauds. And as Peter said, it is people who possibly are living on their own, then got a partnership. Some of it could be unintentional, they forget, I don't know. But I think it's something like 75% of the fraud is the 25% discount on single persons.
I'd quite like to come in there. I know Councillor French and myself have discussed this 25% discount. It is a massive grey area, or a massive potential fraud area. But I know that you've reported to ARP several, and they're not responsive enough. And it isn't just a case of the 25%, because if you've got somebody living on benefits who's got their partner earning 20,000 a year, they shouldn't be on benefits, or 30,000 a year probably today, but they shouldn't be living on benefits. And so it's not just the 25% council tax, it's also the housing benefit and all the additional tax credits that people receive. So this is the tip of the iceberg on fraud. That's public money. And I think ARP could do an awful lot more to be far more responsive on this. I think you would agree with that, Councillor French. That's not down to the internal audit team to do that. That is an external or a partner that we have. But looking at ARP, I do think that they are not responsive enough when they get information. They don't act on it quick enough.
Okay, that's a fair comment, and I do have a meeting with ARP fairly regularly, so I will raise that with them. They do audit themselves, so the other partners will audit council tax and NDR separately. Whilst we take the enforcement side, they take the other areas and audit those as well. So, and we are doing the NFI review at the moment on SPDs, so that will look at all of those people that you mentioned so far.
Thank you. Peter?
Just a final point really is that the ARP are coming to the next ONS scrutiny, ONS panel meeting, which I think is in March. So they are on the agenda, so maybe some of those issues will be dealt with and can be addressed at that point as well.
I would very much welcome that, if that was the case. Deborah, can you come back on that?
I was just going to say that I did mention to the fraud manager at ARP about including some of the fraud within my annual report at the end of the year. There was a slight discussion about whether or not she might actually come along to this meeting if members wished as well. So that was, that was not an invitation from me, that was a voluntary from her.
Be nice to see her.
Okay.
Councillor Hack.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, this single person discount seems to be a particularly difficult issue to resolve. I remember, I think it was last year, year before last, when I was on the ONS committee, we had to keep revisiting this. It was discussed. But aren't there any kind of templates that have been developed to make progress on this? Because it is rather concerning, and people who are paying huge amounts of or not getting any benefits are potentially paying a lot of money. It's not fair to those people. I have a number of other kind of minor queries, if you like. I thought the street lighting was a function of the Cambridgeshire County Council highways, but it's mentioned here. I'm sure there is an answer to that. But what is a bit more, or quite more worrying, is the risk associated with, for example, looking at the table, number 8, supplier amendments, anti-fraud, risk is high, rating is high. You got 4 in the priority actions. Can you elaborate on that, please? And also, is it possible to put some figures into this in terms of pounds and pence? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hack.
So the supplier amendments one, I'll just touch on that quickly. So we have a lot of fraud alerts through about people trying to obviously either say that they're somebody they're not, or they're trying to change standing data to creditors to try and get a payment made through to a fraudulent bank account. So we did a separate audit on this just to pick up and look at our internal procedures with finance, just to check that the verification process that we have would be a good prevention, and it does work, that the staff are aware of what they do and that is actually followed. It's from time to time, it's just worth doing, and those were the actions that came out of that. But I think those are all they're all in hand now, so the staff are aware of it. I still send them those fraud updates just as a sort of regular reminder. In fact, I sent one last week, didn't I? Because they come through so regularly. Fraud is just massively increasing. So we just need to have those prevention tools in place, and we have now.
Yeah, but I mean, Chair, what sort of prevention? I hope, the reason I'm feeling a bit concerned about this is sometimes you read in the press figures that a person, I don't know, claiming benefits from 6, 7, 8, 10 different addresses and ending up earning hundreds of thousands of pounds. It's a bit kind of exceptional, and I don't mean to be alarmist. Do we have any measures in place to prevent this sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So FDC doesn't do the council tax and housing benefit. That's done by the ARP partnership, which is the other authority, some in Suffolk and some in Norfolk. They do that service for us, but certainly they do have a lot of prevention in place. And auditing it as well to check that those prevention measures work. So, yeah, you will see the reports back from them when they have finished doing those audits as well. But generally, it's very good.
Can you possibly quantitate any of these risks?
I wouldn't like to at this stage. No, I can find out anything for you, but because it's done by the partnership, no, I wouldn't be able to.
Maybe useful, Chair, to give the committee some kind of measure of the risks that are involved.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
The quantitating these risks may be of use in giving the committee some sort of measure of the extent of the risks.
Peter, would you like to comment on that?
I think what would be useful then for this committee is we can invite Katie Mills from the Cambridgeshire Fraud Hub to come and present, because she's got lots of facts and figures, and they are quite eye-watering figures, the amounts they save in terms of things like the single person's discount. So it might be worth putting on the work plan for and Katie would be delighted to come and share with you the work they do on this, because it's just constant. It is absolutely constant. So every one you find, there's another one being added. But it is very reassuring, the work they do. So I think we could put, when we come to the work plan, Chair, we could put a visit from the Cambridgeshire Fraud Hub, who work across a lot of districts, but they've got targeted data for Fenland, could come and share that data with this committee.
Councillor Frank.
Excellent. You don't ask, you don't get. Thank you very much. And Chair, my remaining queries, please, if I may. Or should I repeat them? The street light, I thought, was a function of the county council highways.
Oh, I did too. Yeah, so
I did too. Okay. And
then have their own streetlights
yeah,
that they're
it's-
responsible for as well. That's what they're talking about in the report.
yeah, so the high. Oh, sorry. So yeah, the county council do. You're correct. They do have the highways responsibility for the streetlights, but because Fenland does own its own, and it also does them on behalf of those for the some parish councils as well. That is what the audit scope was about, looking at how they're dealt with and how they're managed.
yeah, thank you. And could you finally elaborate on number 8, please, in your table? The suppliers. Supplier amendments, the anti-fraud.
Yes, so this is following on from what I said earlier. So this is where we looked at the changes to standing data for creditors, be that their address and their telephone or their contact details, or their banks, more importantly. So that was looking at that and seeing that we do have the procedures in place and the prevention measures to make sure that those frauds are controlled. If somebody writes in and says, I work for company X, Y, and Z, and this is my new bank details, we can't just take it on face value. We have to verify it against established source documents and go back to them and check that has come from them before we make any changes to our standing data. And that is now secured and in place.
Thank you.
I think that's okay. Councillor French.
Thank you. I'd like to come back on the fraud and also the street lights. For the street lights, we do own quite a lot, and we do work for the parish councils. We did have a new contractor put in place, I believe it was last year. The last time I spoke to the engineering manager, we're not completely satisfied with this new contractor. But I'm waiting for more updates, so maybe at the next meeting I can or if you can want to have a look and have a word with the officer concerned. With regard to the fraud, I mean, we are talking across all the partnerships, millions of pounds, and I have repeatedly asked, once these court cases have gone through court and the decision is made, that these should be published. They should be named and shamed. There was one several months ago in Chatteris. They were named and shamed. They had to pay the X amount of money, and it was thousands of pounds. So I keep pushing. Once a court decision is there, we want it published.
Yeah, I view fraud very. It's a big problem, but for somebody to have less, so say for somebody to have more, somebody else has to have less, and for the people that are defrauding, it means everybody else who does pay their council tax is having to pay more. And we're here to represent all taxpayers across Fenland, and that includes, very much so, includes the good people who don't do the fraud, and we're letting them down by not actioning this. Any other questions from Councillor Clark?
Pardon. In item 9, corporate performance, reasonably limited, and I will just look through limited. You know, there's cause for concern. How long is it before something like that, your comments are taken on board and that gets back into the green, and who chases that up to improve it?
Okay, so this was an audit that was carried out last year, and then this year we did a follow-up on those actions to check that they've been introduced properly. The follow-up did suggest that it was very difficult for us to evidence that some of them had been introduced fully. So what I've done is I've left those on my monitoring sheet to go through and check them, because I don't want people to mark them off as completed when they're not. So those ones are in there that it's saying it's limited, because at the moment I'm not still fully confident that we've introduced it to the right level. But that is being monitored internally by internal audit. We do send reports to the management team and corporate management team regularly, so they know which ones are outstanding, and it's up to management to put those actions into place.
I would think it's concerning that if your management aren't reaching a reasonable level, it doesn't set a very good example to all the ones below them to bring their game up higher. So just a disappointed score, really, I think, for a corporate team.
Yeah, well, the management and the corporate team are the ones that are overall responsible for the actions, but for example, the performance management ones are key performance indicators that are calculated by the individual services. So that was what was the scope within that audit. But I will continue to monitor that, so rest assured.
Any other questions? Nope. I've got a couple. Well, it looks, this is on item 6, 2.4. What are the priorities? Who sets the priority for doing the audits at which stage? Is it we haven't done that for 2 years, we better do one, or is it do we look at it as the importance of, do we look at the financial ones because that brings the money in and that's failing? How do we prioritise where we do the audit work?
So it's a mixture of all those things you said. We like to cover, we can't cover everything. It should be risk-based, and work those on a sort of rota basis, essentially, because they are the important ones. They're the ones that if any of the controls fail, they're more financial, they're monetary based. So that's a bigger risk to the council. So those ones we look at, as I say, on a sort of rota basis. Payroll has now been stepped up to being annual, but of scope and concentrate or focus on that for each year. The other ones are, the service ones are risk-based, so we look at the risk registers, we look at the individual risks within the service plans, we look at the change of staff, risks or complaints, anything that can come up that can basically affect what you feel that the value of the risk would be for those areas, and then match those accordingly with what resources you've got. But there's certainly plenty to look at.
I should imagine there's a bit of firefighting in this. As things crop up, they need to be dealt with. Would that be true as well?
Yes, yeah, that comes along. And also I think as we move forward towards LGR, certainly we've spoken, Peter and myself, and with transformation, but I think there'll be a lot more of an element of, instead of, we still have to do the day-to-day audits because that's our job, but there'll be a lot more movement towards helping with transformation and looking at the projects and looking at our smooth transition, because that ultimately will be one of the biggest risks for the council. It needs to be in a good position going forward. And even as Councillor French said, concerns over ownership of assets, that's something that I raised last week with transformation. It's an area of preparatory work that you need to be on top of and to a certain level going forward. And I think that's where audit will come through and perhaps spend a lot more resource doing that. But it needs to essentially it needs to still deliver an audit opinion. That's my job. So I can't divert too much resource. Well, I don't have too much resource, but I can't divert too much to non-audit work.
No, that's fine. I see the pressures you're under with that.
Can I just add a couple of things before we move on?
Peter would like to add something else.
Because when you said we will bring the draft internal audit plan to this committee for sign off, and that will come to the next committee meeting, and it is based on a number of factors, as Deborah has said, but this committee will sign off that audit plan. And again, what I need is enough audits done to enable us to give an annual opinion and also to keep the external auditors happy. The second thing I'll say is, has been asked about outstanding actions. We do have a list of outstanding actions which we take to management team, and we chase those actions up. So I'm usually very vocal about that, and I'm actually at the point of saying, well, you know, you can agree when that action's done, but if it starts to become overdue, I am going to ask you to come to this committee to explain to this committee why you haven't done your actions. So I'm getting a bit fed up with some of the outstanding actions and the overdue ones, because I don't say to them, you've got to have it done. We agree a reasonable time for that action to be completed. Therefore, there's no excuse for it not to be done. So we are very, very harsh on that and very vocal. So I'm hoping for a lot more improvement the next time we bring a report here.
Thank you, Peter. Did you want to come back, Deborah? Are you happy? No? Right. Councillor French, I'm sure she has a burning question here for us.
Don't know about that. Obviously, a lot of everything hinges on the local government reorganisation. We don't know what's going to happen. Hopefully, summer, autumn, we might actually know a bit more. We did decide not to proceed with the new local plan several months ago, but then decided, because of the local government reorganisation, we would restart this, and that was decided on the 15th of December last year. Will you be involved looking at this? Because obviously it is going to cost a considerable amount of money. I believe it's over £1 million. But you know, if we don't do a local plan, the government may do it for us and will cost us maybe double, if not triple. So will you be looking at the process as it's going on?
I don't think Audit will get involved in that. No. It has to have a local plan. It's a statutory requirement. And yeah, you're quite right. We do need to have one internally, not let the government have to write one for us. I don't see that it's going to be necessary for internal audit to get involved in. It's a very specialised thing. I can't see what value we would add. We know we're going to do it. All we could do is check that it's progressing and it's going to be delivered on time. But even then, as I say, it's so specialist. You'd be better to get advice from the people writing it, I think.
Happy with that, Councillor French, or would you like to come back?
I'm more concerned about, you know, the cost of the plan. You know, we need to really look at that very carefully and not waste money and not duplicate on stuff that we've already got, because we do have a lot of information. That's my concern, is duplication of what we've already got and could still be used.
And Councillor French, I can assure you that Sian and myself will be all over that and tracking the spend on that, and so is the leader, and that's always on our updates.
If I could come in there. On the local plan, we started the first one in 2019 and that never got materialised, and then it was dropped. This one's being forced upon us because it's financially better to do it than not. We've also got Inspire, which was one of my questions on here about doing Inspire audits, but with time with local government review reform, we're spending a lot of money on Inspire, and that could be a risk to the council. So are we doing any audit work on those? The local government reform, there's no guarantee this is going to even come through yet. It hasn't been through the Houses of Parliament yet. And Mr. Starmer doesn't have a good reputation for sticking to his guns. He's good at U-turns. Who knows whether this will come to fruition or whether they'll just push it through and won't worry about the cost it's going to put back on the people. I am concerned about it, but they're not. So are we looking to do work on audit work on the Inspire projects, because they're very expensive, and also to look at the audits on what the cost of local government reform is going to be, because I think they're very big risks. If you looked at that on a risk register, they would be right up there as top priorities to myself.
So it's already on the plan for this year to look at the Inspire projects, and instead of doing a specific Audit on that. I'm sort of working alongside with Transformation on it because they're the PMO dealing with the projects, and I've been just trying to work alongside them and trying to introduce the governance role within that, because that's where I feel that audit would sit. They have already designed a sort of like let's call it a governance checklist. So I've been, speaking to them about that. But certainly we will be getting involved and attending more of the meetings. I think there's more value in seeing how it's working rather than looking at the controls behind it, really, which is more what audit would do traditionally. I think as regards the value of LGR and the amount of money, I mean, I'm just speaking now on what I've heard that's happening within the council rather than anything I've done within audit, but certainly they're tracking that now. We're starting to hear discussions where we're looking at timesheets, and amount of money that's going into it is going to be separately recorded so that this can be monitored and looked at. What we do with that, I don't know, but at least it will be there.
We could always ask central government for some money to pay for it, couldn't we? Maybe.
Well, that's the idea, I guess, isn't it? That it will be billable, or
it shouldn't be paid for by the ratepayers of Finland. Peter, would you like to come back on that at all? Is there anything you'd like to say?
I think they are two big areas, Chair, and local government reorganisation is happening across Cambridgeshire, and there is a implementation director who is starting in March, which will oversee the thing for the process for the whole county. Finland are one part of that. The leader has requested, and at last cabinet we set up a local government reserve, which is not to spend on external consultants or anything. It's to capture internal costs, as Deborah has just said. So there's a lot of us being pulled into various work streams on this local government reorganisation. So Sian and myself are already part of a finance one. Stephen's part of an ICT customer service. This is only going to get bigger and ramp up. So we're capturing the costs that we are spending on LGR, which is in the main or completely internal staff time, which will have an impact because we're not exactly resting on our laurels anyway. So we're all busy. So we're keen to see how that will work. On the Inspire, we've already set up we're using the transformation team as the programme management office to track spend and to look at what's going on in those areas. And Deborah will put that on the internal audit plan.
Thank you very much, Peter. Any other questions? No. Councillor French, last minute, just in there.
Thank you. I don't think this really will be internal audit. I think this is more for Sian and Peter with regard. I mean, the government are throwing so many different things at its local government reorganisation, food collection, which we'd hoped that was going to start in June. That doesn't appear to going to happen. That's going to cost quite a lot of money. We just don't know. So I would like an update on a regular basis. I suppose Cabinet will get that update. But the officers have spent a lot of time on this new food collection, and we're stumbled again, and it's not our fault.
Councillor Clark.
Food waste set up. I know that DEFRA is paying the bill to set this all up, or who's paying for the bill to set it up? Somebody was.
We were originally told when food waste was first talked about that it would be funded by New Burdens, and we did initially get New Burdens funding for the purchase of the capital, the vehicles, and the caddies. We also got some transitional revenue funding to tide us through for the first few months on the revenue costs, i.e. staff, etc., etc. Now, what has happened since then is that in the recent local government finance settlement, they've told us that the revenue funding for food waste is in that settlement. But for the life of us, no one can see where that funding is. So at the moment, we have built the costs into our budget, the draft budget, which has just been published, which will be talked about at full council next Monday. So we've got the costs of food waste in. We're still pushing for clarity on whether there'll be any further funding because we didn't do particularly well out of the financial settlement. And I'm not sure, it looks as though a lot of the extra funding that was about went to unitaries and counties, which probably tells us everything we need to know about local government reorganisation. So yes, it is included in the budget, John, but we're told there's no more funding coming because it was included in the settlement.
Thanks for that. I mean, I only know what I heard on an employment committee that it was going to be funded by, I'm sure I understood it as DEFRA. And my question was going to be, is it a risk that the government pay to set all this up and then a year later withdraw all the funding and it comes down to this council to pay the bill? And should that be a risk that we should be considering? But we sound as if we've missed one bit and we've already jumped to the next. So that's nice to get that understanding. Thank you.
I think, Councillor Clark, your opinion of the gold standard waste collection and the pitfalls of it are playing out quite nicely. I think this is another case of the government's going to drop us in it on this one. And truthfully, short of turning around and saying we're not going to do it after we've bought the lorries and employed the people, which, you know, we can't turn around and say no. So they've caught us, haven't they? Anyway, enough of that. Any other questions? No? Right, from the chair. I have concerns. We've already heard this afternoon that the 0.4 person is highly unlikely that we are going to be able to find somebody to resource that because of the 0.4. We're taking on extra work. We're doing extra audits, which need to be done. Councillor Clark has already highlighted that we are not green enough, not in a climate change way, but on the average, still we have too many ambers and too many reds in there, which would be nice to see come up. The only way to put that right is to have more staff in here to put it right. We've also heard that we've got new members in the accounts team, and you know, whenever you take somebody new on to train them, that takes work away from the qualified people because they have to show the trainees what they're doing. As much as we hear we're fully resourced, from the people on the shop floor, are we resourced enough? Have you got enough to deliver this work? Because we can't criticise you, and it's not criticism. We can't highlight the fact that we are not green enough on the RAG register and expect you to do the work when we're not giving you enough staff to do the job that we're asking you to do. Are we fully resourced properly? I think this committee does need to know that, because if not, that's a risk. We're not going to be able to complete the work that we do. Could I have an opinion on that, please?
Ideally, I'd like to put that 0.4 with some additional budget and get some additional resource in. That would be my preference. I think we're working definitely at very minimum. We definitely couldn't work at any less. I will be able to give an opinion this year. So on that basis, I guess we have done enough work, and we are supported by ARP, who do some of the audits for us. Going forward, it's difficult to say, isn't it? Because we've got that budget. I'd like to be able to spend it. I'd like to be able to have some IT audit thrown in, because I think that gives a better coverage of what we've looked at. It's just making the best use of that 0.4, or whether to add to it to make something different.
And you've also told us this afternoon that you've got somebody off for 2 weeks. That's 74 hours of
3 weeks, yeah.
You can't put a pint in a half-pint pot. It doesn't fit. And if you lose that resource, you cannot make that time up when you're already pushed for staff. I know it puts you on the spot, because it's awkward for you to say, yes, we could do with extra resource, but equally, as a committee, we're asking you to do this work. We're asking you for different things, and it's unfair to ask somebody to do something if you haven't got the tools to do it. And that tool is having staff. You can't run a business without staff. I'll let you come back to me on that, and then I'd like to just have a word with Peter, if that's okay.
I think it's probably fortunate at the moment that we are deferring the audit plan to May, because if we were doing it at March, I think I would struggle at this point to know where we would be positioning ourselves, because we've still got some audits from this year's plan that we can roll over and keep going with. That's what would happen. They would either defer from one year to the next, or we just continue with them and then start the plan afresh once you see it in May, which is probably what I'd propose we do. Like I say, there'll be enough audits with opinions against them to give a audit opinion for the annual governance statement, which is what we want. Yeah, it's just another conversation that needs to be had. Ideally, yes, I would. I'm just mindful that everything has to come with an LGR backdrop to it now. If we spend money now, does it bolster us? We're at a risk if we lose either of those two auditors who are both part-time. So we've only got 1.1 is all we have. If either of those two do go, yes, we'd be back to being in a very risky position again, a critical position.
Thank you very much. Peter, how do we stand? You're the man with all the money. How do we stand with finance?
And I'm not giving any more away. That's as simple as that. So I could go to any of my managers and they'd all say they want extra staff, and I think that's fair. I think in this particular instance, Deborah said she can give an opinion for 25-26, and then I think what we're looking at is when we bring the audit plan here, we need to match up resource to that audit plan. So I think we have to be very, very careful. It's got to be a risk-based audit plan. I looked historically at some audits, we've done in the past, and is it worth doing those audits? I'll question that. So I think I'm very mindful of the requirements. I think we need to bring the paper to the May committee with the draft audit plan, match that to the resource requirements. I'm not going to take that 0.4 resource away from Deborah for the budget for next year. And we'll have to look at that. It's about matching resource to the work that's needed. There's no doubt that LGR's changed the landscape in a lot of areas, Chair. And what we don't know yet is how much time we're going to have to be putting into LGR. And by default, that might mean we need to look at resource in various areas. But I certainly won't compromise on governance. And I think there are, as we've seen today, there are areas where we can improve, and there always should be areas where we can improve. And if I start losing sleep about things, then I will be releasing the purse strings. But at the moment, we're doing what we need to do. I'm worried that 26, 27 will bring extra workload, particularly around LGR.
Yeah, no, thank you for your opinion. A lot of this is debate, which I feel is important that we should have. The fact you haven't got any more money, I'm a bit disappointed, Peter, really. That's certainly you. You're part of CMT, I'm not. We are asking more of Deborah and her team, and if you feel it's okay, then that can come back to this committee if we feel that needs to change, or we can discuss it again. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
I think just to say, I think we're asking more of everybody. And I think, we're also looking at ways that we can improve efficiencies. We're looking at AI in some areas as well, and Stephen and his team. So we've got to carry on looking for process efficiencies as well. And it's about getting the balance right, isn't it? Because I've just published a budget which shows we've got a 2.8 million deficit for next year. Originally, I'm sure that won't be the case when we come to the year end, but we can only budget on what we know now. So there'll be some debate, I'm sure, about this at Cabinet and Council on Monday. Now the budget papers have been published, but we just have to keep everything under constant review, which is what we do.
The budget, the forecast budget is always pessimistic, and it improves during the year anyway. Hence, we've got a budget equalisation fund that built up to £1 million because that was where it was budgeted to. So yeah,
it's built up to £2.2 million now, Chair.
Well, no, I'm not on Cabinet. I don't know these things, Peter. Thank you very much. Anyway, great. Right. So, any further questions, Councillor Clark?
Just to make a comment on the remarks Peter made, you can push your staff so far, but there does come a time when you've pushed them so far that you can't push them anymore, and they take their expertise somewhere else. So it's a very difficult road to walk.
It is, and you know, I have a really good relationship with all of them, and they'll let me know if that's too far. Hence why I'm reducing my hours next year, Councillor Clark.
That was lively, wasn't it? Anyway, any more questions or any comments from the floor, from the chair, from the committee?
But seriously, just to add to that comment, I am reducing my hours, and I will be focusing more on finance and internal audit. They'll be the key areas for me, which I think will be important going forward.
Well, I hope you enjoy this extra time you're having off then, Peter, and you'll
Absolutely.
go hunt Stanton once a week or something. Anyway, right. Any more questions? No? Right, as there are no further questions, therefore the recommendation is for the committee to consider and note the activity and performance of the internal audit function, and to note the current status of agreed actions and review and challenge overdue high-risk items. Please can you raise your hand if you disagree with the report recommendations? There are no raised hands, therefore the recommendations are agreed. Oh.
Just to add that, yeah.
Yeah, can we just note that? Yeah, yeah, thank you very much. Yeah. Sorry, come on. I'm getting there. Agenda item 7 is the corporate risk register review. I now call upon Stephen Beecher, Head of ICT, Digital and Resilience, to introduce the report. Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. The Risk Management Group, they've again carried out their usual quarterly review of the corporate risk register. We've made updates to 8 of the 15 risks and no risk scores have been changed. Unless you feel it necessary, I won't take you through each of these updated risks, as I'm sure you've already reviewed these, but happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Can I have a proposer for the report, please? Councillor French. And can I have a seconder? Councillor Hack. Thank you both very much. I now open the item for discussion. Please raise your hand if you have any comments to make. Well, Stephen, you have got very, very lately this afternoon, haven't you? Yeah, yeah. Right. As there are no speakers on this recommendation, as there are no further speakers, therefore the recommendation is that the committee to approve the latest corporate risk register. Please raise your hand if you disagree with the report recommendation. Do you disagree? No, right. Oh, sorry. If you wanted to come in, Councillor French, if you've got.
I would just like to say thank you to Stephen. The reason we're not going to question it because he's done an exceptionally good job. So that's why he's getting off so late this afternoon. So well done.
Right. There are no raised hands, therefore the recommendations are agreed. Agenda item 8 is the Audit and Risk Management Committee work plan. Are there any questions or comments? Peter?
Could I just suggest we add to the work plan the subject item I talked about earlier, which was to invite the Cambridgeshire Fraud Hub to one of the future meetings, if that's okay with the committee.
Yeah. Any further questions? No. There are no raised hands, therefore the recommendations are agreed. No, sorry. Thank you. The work plan is noted for information.
I was just going to say that so I've drafted this programme, but it is based on previous year's programmes. So as a committee, you know, you're very welcome and should feed in any items that you want to bring to the table, because it is your committee. It's not mine. Also, we mentioned in the risk register as well that we've got the new Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act and the duties upon the council to to prevent fraud. I propose that perhaps I do a quick session with you before the next meeting, so I can just run through that act and what I know about it, just to enlighten you in case you need to know what the council's doing. We've made a list of some of the fraud prevention measures we have, but we could just have a very informal 10 minutes on it or something. And any training requirements or areas that you would like to have as well, please feed those to me, because you've had very little training as a committee. So welcome that, because when we look at your, when I go to do the self-assessment with you as to how effective you are as a committee, that's one of the things that you need to self-assess yourselves on. The training, the skills, anything else you want to highlight that perhaps needs some improvement, or something that we're not providing you with as well. So yeah, feel free to come back with anything, and we'll see what we can do.
Thank you, Deborah. When we had the pre-meet a few days ago, training was discussed, and I think you sent through a list of, or sent an email out with the members and the training. I think the members on this committee needs updating. I think that some of the members that are down here maybe are not on here anymore, and it would certainly be worth looking at. And I suggested when we had the pre-meet that maybe we'll look at the training that people have had, and really there's very minimal, and quite a lot of it is out of, well, not out of date, but it's quite historic. And I think maybe if we organised some training and we did it sort of starting with the basics, and then everybody is trained, and we work on having the training done, let's bring this committee up to a high standard and get people in so that we understand what people are doing. If the training is there, I very much welcome that. I think we need to have a look at members. We've got a lot of empty seats around here this afternoon. I think that needs to be addressed. That's a members problem. But I think once we resolve that, I think we need to look at the training, get some proper training, and bring this committee up to the standard to support you. Right. Agenda item 10 is items of topical interest. Either there are none or report. There are none. There are none or report any items received. Agenda item 10 is the items which the chairman has deemed under item 3 deemed urgent. There are none, and this marks the end of the meeting, and I declare the meeting closed. Thank you all for attending.